Advocates for separated migrant families here in the U.S. are keeping the heat on the Trump administration. But the president and his lieutenants are turning their attention to speeding up deportations. White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor begins our coverage.
No hate, no fear. Immigrants are welcome here.
Today, in the border city of McAllen, Texas, outrage over separating families boiled over into a new week. And in Reno, Nevada, hundreds of miles north of the border, this demonstration was to protest Attorney General Jeff Sessions. It was his zero-tolerance policy of prosecuting migrants for illegal entry that ignited the storm over family separations.
The president has made this clear. We're going to continue to prosecute those adults who enter here illegally. We are going to do everything in our power, however, to avoid separating families.
President Trump ordered an end to separations last week, and over the weekend, the Department of Homeland Security claimed progress. It said so far it has reunited more than 500 children with parents who'd been separated under the zero-tolerance policy. It said the Department of Health and Human Services was working to reunite another 2,000 or so separated children in its custody. And DHS said it was making information available to help detained adult migrants get in touch with their children. News reports, however, have underlined how difficult it will be. In Washington today, Democratic Senator Bill Nelson of Florida said the president's executive order did not provide much help. Nelson recently visited a Florida shelter housing separated children.
The executive order is a sham. It was an attempt to divert attention. The executive order does not address the 2,300 children that were separated from their families.
The president has now turned his focus on the legal process for those crossing the border illegally. Yesterday, he said, when somebody comes in, we must immediately, with no judges or court cases, bring them back from where they came. He followed up today during a sit-down with King Abdullah of Jordan.
We want a system where when people come in illegally, they have to go out. And a nice, simple system that works.
There was this, too, from White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, briefing news reporters for the first time in a week.
Just because you don't see a judge doesn't mean you aren't receiving due process.
In the meantime, the administration is edging closer to using military bases to house detained migrants. Defense Secretary James Mattis named 2 bases, Fort Bliss and Goodfellow Air Force Base, both in Texas. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Yamiche Alcindor.
We turn now to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue for a look at the immigration debate from Capitol Hill. I'm joined by Republican Congressman Leonard Lance of New Jersey. Congressman Lance, thank you very much for joining us. The compromise bill that the Republican House leadership has put together, I call it a compromise. It's a cross between what the leadership and Republican moderates have wanted. First of all, are you for it? And second of all, do you think it's going to pass?
I am for it. I did not vote for the Goodlatte bill. I was one of 41 Republicans not to vote for the Goodlatte bill. And therefore, I hope that this bill passes. But only time will tell this week, Judy, whether this bill will pass.
What is in the bill that you think makes the difference?
The original bill did not contain a path to citizenship for Dreamers, and this bill does, and I think that is a significant difference.
It's my understanding that this bill also has language that undoes the current legal language that basically says that children cannot be held in detention with their parents, that they have to be separated, and that this bill would say essentially that those children can be held with their parents, but indefinitely, that there's no longer a 20-day limit on that.
I favor holding children for no more than 20 days. In other words, the Flores agreement. And I think that it's not in the best interest of the nation to hold children longer than 20 days. And I also think, Judy, that children should be with their parents. And I am a co-sponsor of another piece of legislation that does that. And also, Judy, I think we have to increase the number of immigration judges. And as you know, Senator Dianne Feinstein and Senator Ted Cruz are working on that issue in what is apparently a bipartisan capacity in the Senate.
Well, I want to ask you about the judges, but I first want to get clarification on this question of whether children could be held indefinitely with their parents. If that language is in the bill, you said you could still support it?
I'm not sure I could if children are held indefinitely. I want children held only for 20 days.
But obviously with their parents. But again, it's our understanding that that's the language in the bill, that they would be held, but it would be for an indefinite period of time.
I don't want to hold people indefinitely. I would have to look at that language. I think indefinite time frame is of course, problematic.
Well, let me ask you about the judges issue.
Yes.
The president has said we don't need more judges. You just said you've called for there to be a doubling, at least, of the judges who can deal with immigration cases. Where's the compromise ground there?
Well, I disagree with the president. I do think that we need more judges, and that is the end toward which others are working, and I am working. And we now have about 350 judges, immigration judges, Judy, and I think we should at least double the number to 700.
But it sounds like you're far away from the president on that when he says we don't need these judges.
That's correct. I disagree with what the president has said. I favor due process of law. I think that due process of law is important in this area as it is important in all areas, because some of those who are coming north are in a very challenging situation in their own countries, and we have to see whether there needs to be asylum. That is not true of a majority, but it may be true of some, and we should be able to examine that case by case, because asylum is warranted in certain circumstances.
Well, I'm sure you know that some people coming to the U.S. seeking asylum are being turned back. They are being told, we understand, that it's because there are just too many cases ahead of them. There's no space for them. Are you comfortable with the way those are being handled?
Absolutely not, and that's why I favor doubling the number of judges for reasons that you understand. I think regarding asylum, we should have an adjudicatory proceeding for each case.
Well, the other thing, and you just alluded to this a moment ago, the president is saying in the last 24 hours that people who come to this country without documents should be sent back to their own countries immediately. And we heard the White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders double down on that today. Are you comfortable with that approach?
I am not comfortable with that approach. I think there should be an adjudicatory proceeding, and that is why I favor doubling the number of judges.
But not to get too much into the weeds here, there's a difference in dealing with people coming asking for legal asylum and those simply saying, I want to come in.
Yes, of course. There certainly are those who cross the border illegally, but in some of the situations, not a majority, but in some, there is the question of asylum, and this country has a long tradition regarding asylum.
Congressman, how do you see this issue as helping the Republican Party or not, this debate? I know that right now you've taken some pretty clear positions. We've just heard you articulate them. You have Republican opposition in the primary in your district in New Jersey. Your opponent, among other things, has taken a more conservative view. Are you concerned that you may be more vulnerable because you oppose the president on some of these things?
I was honored to have been renominated a couple weeks ago, and yes, I did have somebody to my right on this issue. It is, of course, a challenging issue for our nation, but I am confident my views are the views not only of the district I serve, Judy, but also of the American people. The American people want to secure our southern border, but they certainly want a process where there can be asylum, where that is warranted. But we have to move forward in a bipartisan capacity, Judy, and also we have to move forward recognizing that these are not mutually inconsistent. We can secure our southern border, but we also can have a legal process where asylum is warranted, that can be adjudicated appropriately.
Do you believe this bill is going to pass this week, the compromise bill?
I'm not sure of that. The more conservative bill did not pass. There were 41 of us on the Republican side who voted against it. I'm not sure this bill is going to pass, but we have to continue to work on the issue, and we have to work on the issue now, Judy. We can't wait until after the November election.
Which is something I know you said the president had told House members he thought would be preferable. Congressman Leonard Lance of New Jersey, we thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy.